Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for coming today on this beautiful Michigan day prior to the eclipse as we're preparing for that. So I think there's a lot to talk about today. Usually in these events, what I will do is I will cover a little bit about myself, my background, and channeling. And then we get into some of the information that I've been channeling because I'd like to catch everyone up if they haven't been watching the YouTube videos on what the guides have been talking about, what the planetary energies have in store for us. And we know we're walking into a pretty significant one right now. And then we'll do a live channeling portion. So I call in guides, teachers, masters that are suited for this room and beyond because I film, right? And this goes out to everyone on the planet. So I appreciate that you're here in person because you have an opportunity to ask questions today. And those questions will be written down, so we'll pass out cards so that you can write those down so that we get them on the camera. But your vibration, your questions, your intentions become an energetic part of this entire collective creation here. So thank you for being here and being a part of that with me. For those of you who don't know me, I have been doing this for about 4-5 years now. Not something I intended to do with my life, but I believe that we all have something inside of us that many of us have been directed away from. And the reason that we've been directed away from that truth has to do with a collective consciousness on this planet that is creating through us. And that's really what this eclipse energy is all about, is us coming back into that organic state of truth and that creation that we are, not that we do, but that we are, that we vibrate. So I want to talk a little bit about that today, but I want to share a little bit of my story. I'm not going to go into it in length because I know a lot of you already know about me and who I am. But I want to share an interesting part of my journey that I don't often speak about because I do think it's very related to the upcoming eclipse and some things that are going on the planet. So when I started channeling, I was not at all familiar with channeling, nor was this something that I planned to do with my life. I was very resistant of this gift that I now embrace. And I had been connecting with a variety of guides and started to connect with interdimensionals, so extraterrestrials. Before I even believed in extraterrestrials, they started coming to me and providing messages. And so I had been synchronistically guided to the Flower of Life, which, if you're not familiar, we are from the Flower of Life today. We are an organization that is focused on furthering human consciousness in the world. So we had a variety of initiatives. We currently still have a variety of initiatives focused on that mission. And I was angry because I had started this entire awakening process looking out into the world and seeing some things that I was not entirely happy about, but hadn't even realized were going on, very oblivious to what was happening behind the scenes in our government and chemicals in our food, the toxins, looking at Mother Earth and saying, wow, this is quite a mess. So I needed a place to fuel that anger, and Flower of Life turned up for me. And we formed a committee on Flower of Life to start an activist movement. So there were some things that we were focused on, such as GMO food and fluoride in the water and chemtrail and all these things that we know are wrong that we need to see changed. And we were working with, coming up with some initiatives and campaigns for awareness, and things were kind of hitting a roadblock. And I went to my guides and I said, what is it that we need to know as an organization, as a committee, to further these initiatives and to make change in these areas that are pretty stark on our planet? And I was completely dumbfounded by what I was told that day. And as a matter of fact, I sat on it for a couple of weeks before I shared it with anyone else. I was told that we have a reptilian consciousness here on the planet. And that reptilian consciousness was unfortunately dislocated in a cataclysmic event. So their race had experienced a very difficult event, and there was a splitting of timelines in that collective. And they found themselves in a very difficult situation because the way they create is quite different from us. I was told that this reptilian consciousness creates with the mind. And they had gotten to the point in their evolution where they had integrated their emotional body and didn't have a need for it anymore like we do. Not that that's good or bad, right? We know there's so many races out there that have different structures and function differently than what we do. And we as human beings have a beautiful emotional body for a purpose because it's a part of our creative effort. It's how we want to experience our soul journey. But these reptilians, they didn't have a need for an emotional body anymore. They've already gone through that transition, but create through the mind. And notice that Mother Gaia, this beautiful vibratory being, offered energy for them to create. And they took up home here on our planet. And what I was told that day was that until every human being on the planet understood the way this reptilian consciousness was affecting our structure, our lives, our creative energy, that none of those issues would ever change. The toxins in our food, the toxins in our air, the toxins in our water, our government structure, all of these things. And I thought, wow, that's pretty opposite of what I was thinking, because I was ready to charge into some government meetings, and bang my fist on the table and say, this is absurd. Let's get a group of people together in the street and let's protest this. But they said that protesting and all of that anger was only an energy that would fuel further this reptilian consciousness. So as I brought that message forward and started to share it with others, it did take me on a journey of fully understanding. And I'll back up and say fully is only in this present moment, because I am constantly understanding more, acquiring more, learning more, as we all are. So it's unfolding as we go. But here we are in the midst of this eclipse energy, which is all about creation. And I know some of you take my Lightworker courses, which are channeled courses. And in the last one that we've just finished up last week, the guides have been focusing on creation in our singular bodies, in our singular structure. And they've been really talking about identity and how important it is for us to understand who we are and live who we are, because that's what creative energy is. And we've gotten really backwards in the mind about how we're meant to create. So you can begin to see the connection between this reptilian consciousness and creation, because we have been taught to create through the mind. And that mind has taken us outside of what our record holds to live in peace and happiness and fulfillment and bliss and pure health and all of these things that are our divine birthright. And I truly believe this eclipse is taking us back there. It's an opportunity. The splitting of the timelines, many of you know that have been following my material, is something that my guides talk about a lot. That there is a very big splitting of timelines going on right now on the planet, and this eclipse is driving that home. Splitting of timelines meaning the same way that reptilian consciousness had a cataclysmic event that split them into two different subgroups, we have a similar event going on our planet within the human collective. And we see it, do we not? We see those who are still suffering, struggling, getting, pulled in by the media and the news. And we see differently the way those things are evolving, some of us. And that's the split, okay? I want to talk to what's happening on the planet right now and the way we're responding to it, because it's a difficult situation we have in front of us. Yet at the same time, I think it is the catalyst for how change is going to happen. And I used this analogy today on one of my Facebook groups for my Lightworker programs. Someone had posted that they were feeling the density in their body. They were feeling anxious because of everything that was going on. It was almost like this fear was building up in her, and she didn't know where it was coming from or how to handle it. And the guide said, when I addressed this question, that many of us, because we've already been in this place where we see things for what they are, we have to check our responsibility. And this is a mind play, okay? We have some things that are unfolding right now. And this is past imprint energy, archetypal patterns. We see it, okay? Whether it's racism, right? Religion, government stuff, the common denominator is hierarchy. We've been dealing in hierarchies. We have been programmed into hierarchies, meaning something is better than something else, right? Whether that's women and men, white versus color, across the board, we can put that imprint on so many things right now going on in our world. And what this eclipse is all about is letting go of those hierarchies. So this feeling that you have, and I've felt it too, the anxiety, my muscles are tight, I feel tension. We have to remember this is an energy that is expressing through Mother Earth, and it's a familiar one. Because we've all been involved in these historic events that we're seeing expressed and cleared right now on the planet, right? We've all been a part of those wars. We've been on either side of them and both sides of them. So of course we're going to feel that. And of course we need to express that emotion. It's human nature. But that responsibility that we feel, I think it's being taken out of context a little bit. So there's a lot of talk right now that I want to bring into this whole conversation about the eclipse, about neutrality. And neutrality is something that the guides that I work with teach a lot. And neutrality is not looking outward at the planet and ignoring what's happening. Neutrality is looking outward at the planet with a higher vantage point and understanding there's a purpose. So what the guides brought in for this woman in my Facebook group was when a mother is birthing a child, she has to go through so much pain and discomfort during that birthing process. But she knows the end result is going to be such a beautiful creation that it's going to be worth every minute of that pain. And she's going to express that pain. She's going to have regret. I mean, right? How many of us that have gone through that process, you know, want to strangle the person responsible. But, you know, we get to the other side of that and we see the beauty in that creation, in all that pain and struggle we had to go through to get to that point. And that's the analogy that the guides brought in for this woman, was that every birthing process has an energy of discomfort within it. And so a lot of what we're seeing on the planet, we really have to bring that perspective in. And that perspective is neutrality. That's not caring. That's feeling that emotion, that's understanding where it comes from, but not getting sucked in a way that this reptilian consciousness takes over. And this is really the key to this split of timelines. Because if we allow ourselves to get sucked in to what's happening on the planet and get involved in the way that I wanted to get involved in GMO food and chemtrail and all this stuff, we're amplifying a frequency, because everything is energy. Everything is energy. So the media I want to speak to, and I think it was Gandhi, correct me if I'm wrong, said that in the ocean there can be some tainted water, but that little bit of tainted water cannot affect the entire ocean. And so what we're seeing play out now on the media and on the planet is just a small fraction of what humanity is all about. So those of you who are in my Lightworkers 7 program and we're talking about identity, take that concept to the collective. What's the collective's identity? And how do we perceive that through the media and everything that we see going on the planet? There's a consciousness that has a vested interest in creating through our mind. And when our mind sees that maybe 1/10 of humanity acting in a way that isn't appropriate, and we blow it up in our minds to what humanity is, we're living an identity, a collective identity. And that is not at all who we are. Because I question when I see that stuff, where's the good? Right now, where is the good? If you ask that subtle question, because it's out there. It's out there. But if you turn on the local news, if you go on Facebook, you're not going to see any of that good. So neutrality isn't being indifferent. Neutrality is knowing and seeing from a higher perspective and looking out to find what the truth really is. Because that truth is there, I guarantee. And that's something that Flower of Life has been really instrumental in doing, is bringing the positive stuff to the surface. And I hear this all the time. All these spiritual people, they just want to be positive all the time and pretend that everything's okay. And I don't buy into that. I don't think that that's what this community is all about. You know, if you have a cold, if you're sick, you're going to find some really good stuff to flood your body with to get rid of that negative bacteria, right? You're going to flood it with vitamin C and chicken soup or whatever you do, silver or whatever you do. And it's the same with vibration, right? We can know what's going on, but we can still look for the good, you know? And so back to responsibility, I feel like a lot of people that are feeling this in the body and in the pit of their stomach feel guilty for feeling good during a time on our planet when everyone else is suffering. And I'm not saying there isn't suffering going on and we should negate that. But what I'm saying is we're moving through a period now where that suffering is going to change if you choose to get on board with your identity and a collective identity that's new. And that's what we're birthing. It's exactly what we're birthing. So the guides have been talking a lot about the way in which this reptilian consciousness has been accessing us. And it's mind play in judgment. It's mind play in looking outside. You know, creator is God, source, whatever you want to call it. And that's what you are. Every cell in your body, the water in your body, this vibrational structure is formed from a God particle. And if that is the case, that means you are divine perfection and that you have that divine perfection blueprint in every cell of your body. But we've been taught to look outside and find it outside of us. You know, we need a doctor. We need someone to teach us. You know, we need someone to tell us. We need religion to show us the way. I'm not saying that searching and learning isn't a positive thing. I do it all the time. But that faith and that trust in what's within has to be mixed in that search. And that's what this reptilian consciousness has done. So we've been taken away from our original structure. Structure is just a fancy word for how we operate energetically. Our emotional body is meant to complement what our mind is making physical. And that energy, it evolves from within us. So when you're living your truth, that emotional body is so supported in that truth that you will have inspired action that the mind is meant to follow. And there's no one else on this planet that could show you that way. You can see examples of it. You might be led to teachers, people who are similar to you, people who will encourage you, people who are here to support you, because every being that you have come across in your life is a reflection of that God energy, bringing you something. You know, it might have been a lesson that you didn't like to learn, right? But that God was still there. So neutrality is when we get through those experiences in a way that we integrate them. Integration is really the key. So I want to use the analogy that the council often brings in, which is in response to a vibrational grid that we work with. So a lot of people know this grid as the record, the Akashic record. The council calls it the energetic light grid. All information, all experience serves this grid. And it expands worlds, it expands the universe, all races, all human beings. And you might think, well, I'm having a really crummy time in my life. How is that expanding anything? What happens is when that experience that you're having, I don't want to say comes to an end, but when it is recognized by you through different lenses, it becomes integrated and it becomes neutralized in that grid. So it gets met with something that is its polar opposite. And that neutrality is expansion. So to bring this down to our day-to-day, we might have something really crummy happen in our lives. Like we get really sick, we have a disease, and we're fighting through this disease, we're looking outside, and maybe we surrender it, we come to some healing, and we're beyond that experience to the point where we see it as something that's serving us. Maybe we grew through that experience, or we learned something new through that experience. Because we were searching for healing, we picked up some really good books that we needed to read, whatever it may be. When we get through the experience, that's when neutrality happens. So if you're using that concept of neutrality on the planet, you're going to be able to see that everything is connected and everything has a purpose. And what we're here to do affects that, singularly and collectively. Collective vibration is changing right now. Mother Gaia is moving at a faster speed. We know that we've seen this in the Schumann frequencies and the rays in those frequencies. That's affecting our structure, our light bodies. We have a lot going on right now. A couple channelings ago, we talked a lot about divine feminine. That divine feminine energy being compassion, the balance of that with the masculine, and how that's serving this whole creative effort. If we remember that divine feminine, that can keep us in the right frame of mind. So yeah, seeing what's happening on the planet, but looking at it in compassion, looking at it from the higher self, from a higher vantage point, and knowing where we're going, where we're headed. And how do you change that? How do you affect it? What you're creating through your singular, unique identity has the biggest impact on that outer perception than anything else. People want to make big efforts and group meditations, and I'm in huge support of those group meditations and all of those efforts. But we negate how powerful we are when we own our creator energy. Because when we are in that state of being, in every experience that we have, and this is what we've been talking about in my last Lightworker program, we've created things through this reptilian mind. We've got some timelines running. We might have gotten a degree, chosen a job or a career in something that we're looking at and going, wow, this just doesn't make sense to me. I don't even like this. Why would I have done this? Well, you did it because we have an influence of reptilian energy on the planet that's creating through the mind. And that's a construct of the mind. But that matters not. If you get really wrapped up in that, you can get stuck in that energy. If you come at it from the perspective of, now I bring my identity to this timeline and I know who I am, everything has to shift. Okay, we don't have to make these cut-off decisions. People are saying, well, I need money, so in order to live, I have to have money, and I can't quit this job today because if I quit this job and it's not who I am, I can't pay my bills, and then all of a sudden we find ourselves vibrating in this lower dense energy. Okay, this lower dense energy is what these reptilian beings thrive on. They need it because it's a slower speed. When you're creating through the mind, you're creating in a slower speed of vibration. The reason for that is you're taking energy and you're making it physical. Okay, so think of someone who's putting together, a table. That's a really physical thing to do. We're using the mind, we're screwing in bolts, we're measuring, we're seeing how it's going to fit together. That's a slower speed of vibration than maybe meditating and astral traveling or whatever you might do. These reptilians that are here, they're this consciousness that is here, it needs that slower speed to manifest because it's an organism of the mind. So that slower speed is density. Look around us. How many of us are suffering in this state of density all of the time, based on what we see outside, based on how we're judging ourselves, based on what we haven't accomplished, based on the choices that we made in the past. So don't get caught in the loop of looking at what you've created in the past and blaming yourself for that, because then you're just bringing that density up where that mind really enjoys spending time and manifesting. The emotional body is a really valuable tool for recognizing that. When you find yourself vibrating for long periods of time in an emotion that doesn't serve you, you know you're not in neutrality. And so back to neutrality, and I know I'm jumping around, I want to make another point. When we're not in neutrality, it's usually because we're in a past timeline that we're reliving, or we're projecting into the future with some type of mind play that isn't serving us. So we have that traumatic car accident. And that traumatic car accident really hurt us in some way. And we are really mad at that person that caused that traumatic car accident. But we relive that in the mind every single day. We are replaying the past. And so what happens is we're going to manifest that past in other areas of our lives because we're an organic structure that loves patterns. And so what will happen is the pattern of that car accident that we're vibrating in the past will show up in other areas of our lives, even though that energy came to a close. We're projecting into the future and we think, well, because of this car accident, I'm never going to be able to make money again. That's not neutrality either, because when you're doing that, same vicious cycle of the mind takes over in the same type of density, right? Present moment frequency is neutrality. And that doesn't mean we're always happy in the present moment. When that car accident happened, we had a lot of emotion that came up. We were sad, we were in pain, we were angry. It's important to express those emotions. Those are present moment frequencies, right? But are we still expressing that pain, that sadness, that anger 5 years down the road from that same event? If we are, we're not in a state of neutrality. We're vibrating in a past energy. And those are the things that we see collectively coming up right now. We're matching them, right? We're matching the hierarchies, all of these things that we've lived through in the past that we still carry that energy from. So the human collective has a collective vibration, just like you have a singular vibration, just like that ocean, we all feed into that. Is it negative just because we have some things coming up right now that we're clearing? I don't think so. I think humanity is an awesome race. And I think that we have so much to live and so much to do that we're on the right path. It's just we're going through some turbulent time to get to that path. And there are some openings that are coming up with the planets that I think are going to be really complementary if you can stay in that state. It's all about perception. So be careful what you're perceiving, be careful what you're tuning into. Be aware of it, be compassionate of it, feel it, but holding on to it, right? If we hold on to these things that happen in the collective and we are spilling it into our news feed, talking about it with family, friends, we're angry about it, we're just elongating that timeline. And so what this split is all about is that, who's going to stay in that suffering? Who's going to stay in that energy of suffering? And who's going to come into a state of bliss, peace, creation, organic truth, identity outside of where the collective is taking them? Any questions about that? Concerns, experiences? Okay. All right, we got about 10 minutes. This is an open forum, so if there's anything anyone wants to talk about, let me know and I can address it. If we don't have any questions, what I will talk about is some of my own experiences beyond what I shared with my channeling and how that's grown for me, because I typically talk about my story in a way that is all about identity and healing, but I want to talk about it in a way that is more focused on manifestation, because a lot of people believe that manifestation is something that we have to effort at. And what I've come to in all this and what I've seen in my own life is that the more you stay in the lane of that truth, the more manifestation comes so easy. So this creator that we are is always supplying us with what we need. And so many of you know I was in chronic pain when I started this journey. I was on a variety of medications and seeing a variety of doctors. I had gotten to the point where I was having my nerves ablated. I had stopped driving. I was 40 years old. as I began to meditate and was led down this path that the universe opened up for me, I found healing. But more important than that, I was challenged by my guides to live something different than what I had been taught I was, which was really uncomfortable for me. I was a stay-at-home mom. I had a bachelor's degree in marketing journalism. I was the PTA vice president. Now all of a sudden was talking to extraterrestrials and archangels and a variety of guides, and I was hearing about reptilians. And I was told this was a purpose, a mission that I had come into this life with. And I was not at all on board with that. And the reason I was not on board was because I was in so much fear of what others were going to think of me and what I had been taught my path was. I mean, listen, I grew up Catholic. I went to college. I got married. What I found on the other side of this was a lot of the things that I didn't do because they were things that were appropriate for me. They were expectations that I had of what I was meant to do, what I was supposed to do, what I was told I was here to do. And because I did all those things, I found myself wound up in this world that was consumed by people that would judge me, because no one understood what was going on with me. I wasn't surrounded by people that had this type of connection. And so my greatest fear was talking about this, let alone my guides had shown me standing up in front of audiences channeling for them. I said, no, there's no way I could do this. But what I found was the more that I walked that path of that truth, the easier it became, and how many of my fears were so false. And it was almost laughable to me sometimes. I think, I'm going to have to tell my dad that I'm channeling, and he embraced me. It's not something that he wants to be a part of. It's not something that he understands, but, his response to me was, I love you. I love you for who you are. And so I was met by God in the responses of all of these people. Even though maybe they didn't want to go that path with me, nothing terrible happened. As a matter of fact, beautiful things began to blossom in my life the more I lived that truth. And I found that I was so supported. I opened myself up to sharing some of these messages very begrudgingly. And as I did, my whole world changed. I made a transition into living this life. I've been totally supported with friends, with new family that I've made, resources and abundance beyond. And I don't feel as if I have to, I don't want to say not effort, because, we all have to work at things. But what I find is when I do what I'm here to do, it doesn't feel like work. And I've gotten out of that lane sometimes. It's easy to look around at others and see the way others are doing things that your new identity tells you are, and try to force yourself into a cookie cutter version of that. And you get off path and you begin to feel it. All of a sudden you feel tired and you're uninspired and you're not feeling happy. And you think, well, wow, I'm here doing what I'm supposed to do. But then you have to take another look at it and say, is this really the way I was supposed to do it? What am I pushing in my life that isn't equal to who I am? So I'm constantly diverting myself back to this path, and it's not perfect. We're all in this energy together where we have to look around us and say, okay, this is the way I used to operate, but what took me off path, and come back to center and say, okay, nothing outside of me matters. What anyone thinks about me doesn't matter. Only what I'm here to do, what I'm here to create, what makes me happy. And the more I do that, the more it blossoms. So I guess what I found in my own journey, aside from healing that chronic pain and having this beautiful connection unfold, is that in your uniqueness, God is, or source is, or creation is. So find that. It doesn't matter what it is. You know, it doesn't matter if you've still got this third dimensional timeline going on where you're working some job that you hate. Find time to express your uniqueness in something that you love, even a little bit a week, because that's going to shift your frequency so much that everything's going to start to unfold. And that's totally what happened to me. So those in the room who don't know me, I am a conscious channel as well as a trance channel. A lot of what I was bringing through just a moment ago is conscious channeling. When I trance channel, I am outside of body. So I've learned that I can do both. I will step outside of myself in a moment and we'll allow some guides to come in and provide us with some messages, answer questions. I connect with a variety of different guides, teachers, and masters. I started with a beautiful being named Jacob, who was a soul guide for me to help me find this gift. Jacob is not really around anymore. He comes in every now and then. As soon as I say that, you know, I'll get a surprise visit. Jeremiah is a collective consciousness that I work with. The Council of Light is a 12th dimensional energy. Pleiadians, Arcturians, Atlanteans, the Dolphin Matrix, Archangels, Mary Magdalene, a very open channel. And I've found that the more I stay open, the more this gift, it just unfolds for me. So what we're going to do today is we're going to allow these guides in, and I want everyone to understand this is a vibrational experience. So it's not just about the words. Sometimes when the guides are speaking, we can get a little lost in the lingo. But if you are lost in the lingo, I just ask that you sit and breathe and meditate and be a part of the experience, because it's intersecting with you in a unique way. So you will walk out of this room forever changed by this vibrational material, as will everyone who connects with it on film today and on YouTube. We are from the Flower of Life, and we offer these events free, but we do take donations to cover the cost of the venue, and anything over goes into our programs. We have an incredible expo coming up, if you're not familiar. It's in November 10th through the 12th in Detroit. And we have some beautiful beings that are coming together. I'm so excited about this one. We have Caroline Corey, Barbara Lamb, Lori McDonald, Jim Vieira, Ethan will be there, I will be there. Who am I forgetting? Mary Rodwell. Mary Rodwell's a huge one. Ken Chorley. We're teaching on a variety of topics, from the extraterrestrial conversation to telekinesis, spirituality, consciousness. We have energy healers, sound healing opportunities. So that's one of our big projects that I hope you'll join us for. We have many others. We are working with youth. We've got Barb Morey that will be there. Barb is going to be doing an aura workshop as well. We work with conscious youth. Oh my gosh, there's so many different things we have going on. We have a magazine. So if you can support, great. If you can't, that is okay. All right. And so I'm going to go ahead and start, and we'll pass out cards and pens. And I don't know who will come in today, although I kind of have a feeling we're going to be working a little bit with the council. Usually we have the Pleiadians coming forward, and I had a new collective trying to come in today, and I'm going to be honest, I'm not really sure who they are. So I'm trying really hard to understand, but if they make an appearance today, I'll be really excited. I want to know who they are. Okay. Greetings, we are the Arcturians. We are a collective of many. We vibrate in an 8th dimensional energy, and we are pleased to be a part of this vibrational transmission, of which all of you are connected. There are many who come to support this transmission as well, so we are not alone. We are also acting on behalf of the Pleiadians as well as the Council of Light, who are all present within us. And we collaborate together in this time to assist the Earth as well as the ascension timeline of the human consciousness. We come forward today as a part of an explanation that we wish to share. Some of this explanation has been brought forward in this vibrational transmission, but we wish to clarify specifically the way in which we see you evolving on the planet and a way in which the reptilian energies are intersecting with that. We have been very, in the past, aligned with the way in which the human consciousness is evolving in its structure. And the reason for this is a very dynamic focus of our intention. We are involved in a variety of different timelines and planetary energies to understand better the frequencies of beings. We have been present here on your Earth at times in which the human structure has evolved as well as been created. And we have a very important role in the way that that structure is aligning. We come today to help you understand in a very simplistic way the meaning behind energy and the way in which you create in alignment with that energy, especially in the response of Mother Gaia's transition and the splitting of timelines that is taking place here. In terms of your structure, we wish to give you a very basic understanding of what that structure is. It is energetic. And if you can imagine a sacred geometric pattern of lines that are crystal running through your frequency, interconnecting with all things, this is what you are made of. That crystalline energetic structure that you hold, it vibrates and it holds a harmony. That harmony, it comes from within you, but it is affected by many things. So thinking of this structure as a one collective, you can imagine tying into all things would be an effect or a draw, many of you may feel, on your energy. We know that as some of you are very sensitive to light and sound, you are experiencing these shifts on the planet as being very negative within your physical body. And as this energetic structure ties into all things, there is a choice that is made by you. And that choice comes from within your free will. Your free will, as it is defined, is something that has been given to you on this planet. And we would go a step further to say that many believe that free will is an act that has been granted by the human consciousness or even your human government. But we wish to go back in time to help you fully understand what free will is and how it has been connected to your structure, because it truly is a frequency and an energetic design. When we speak of energetic design, we know that many of you are familiar with light and light codes and the way that symbols are brought forward. Many of these symbols have sacred geometric meaning, and we look at this frequency of free will as having its own sacred geometric pattern. It is something that comes from other vibrational genetic beings. It is not something that originated here on Earth. And to give you an example, many of you understand the way in which vibrational beings act as a one collective, and we will use the Pleiadians as a perfect example. If you are to vibrate in a ninth dimensional experience with the Pleiadians, you would understand that they connect to each other and that they hold a frequency of free will as a collective. That free will, as you call it, as you may interpret it as singular, is actually functioning as a one. What it means is that all beings in that collective are making choices on behalf of one another. So when there is a decision to be made, if that race or collective has a singular type of experience, their singular experience is harmonized with the collective in such a way that it's always manifesting in alignment with everything else. So beings in singularity are not creating energies that are affecting the collective from a lower dimensional standpoint. They are not creating timelines that are disruptive, nor are they creating situations that would be harmful. This is not to say that the ninth dimensional Pleiadian Collective does not have an ascension timeline. All beings in all races and all dimensions have experiences that they must have to evolve themselves. But because they have come to the meaning of this connection of free will, they use it in a way that is second nature. And that is originally where free will on this planet has come from. Not specifically from the Pleiadians, but from many other races that have vibrated in a one collective consciousness in this way and seen the benefit of using free will in its expression of singularity to create an environment of collective nature that is harmonized. Human beings were given free will in its creative structure in order to do the same. And you may question, why is it then that in this free will, we are seeing much of what's happening on the planet in this time erupt as something that is not to our benefit, and that is often to our detriment. And this is where we want to bring in the explanation of the reptilian consciousness, because Through this structure, if you are to connect to all things that are earthly, and earthly beings include interdimensionals, the reptilians are a part of that connection. Now, in saying this, we ask all of you to vibrate above fear, because we know that when we bring up the reptilians on your planet, there is an automatic assumption that there is a fearful energy to be understood. And we want to bring the reptilian consciousness to you in a different light, because when it came to this planet, it was never intended to create the chaos that is ensued here, but it came to create through you in a way that it could manifest its own reality and be reintegrated back into its own race. So there are reptilians that exist in benevolent form that hold information differently than those collective beings that are present on your planet in this time. Now, when they came forward, their structure vibrates differently than your own. It is held in a different structure, just as every other being connects differently to a sacred geometric harmony. So to give you an analogy of this, if you were to line up a variety of different interdimensional beings and you could see through the energy layers to this sacred geometric grid line that they have connecting to all things, the patterns would look different. And for the simplicity, for the sake of simplicity, we will use geometric structures. Perhaps the Pleiadians look like a triangle, and the Arcturians look like a square, and the human beings look like a circle, and the reptilians look like an octagon. But regardless, each structure holds its own sacred geometric pattern and harmonic vibration. And the reason for this is the structures operate different. When you came to this earth as human beings, what you knew was that your creation was going to be very physical, and you enjoyed that. Your soul knew that creating in physical was going to be the essence of bringing forward this beautiful collective experience. And reptilians also are very physical beings at times in their evolutionary process. As you came, you embodied the beautiful aspects of all organisms that were a part of that creation. You were given an emotional body, and you were given a mental body, and you were also given a physical body. And all of these things became a part of that sacred geometric pattern in the way that it unfolded. You are seated human beings. What that means is that within your DNA are the genomes of all races. And the reason for this is that the human beings were created in likeness of the higher vibrational aspects of all of these races. And this 12-strand DNA that you hold is representative of all of the collectives in every dimension, holding the information and the timelines to allow you to create in this way. The reptilian structure is a less complex organism than humans. The reason it is less complex is that in the vibration it resonates from, it does not need this complexity. And when we speak of complexity, we speak specifically of the human emotional body. Even the egoic structure, to some degree, has been integrated within the reptilian race. And many of you may perceive this as a negative aspect, but we perceive it as, from a higher vantage point, a positive, because when you have gotten to the point where you've integrated the emotional body as well as the empathic nature of your ego, you are now creating in a higher vibrational, faster speed through physical. And you don't have to use your navigation system in the same way that human beings do, because you've already learned many of the lessons. But when this reptilian consciousness arrived, and we want to back up to say that many of you may not be aware that there was an event that took place that is very similar to the eclipse energy that is coming to your planet. Within the reptilian consciousness, there is not a need for the solar energies. The solar energies were specifically designed for certain races to complement and accentuate creation. The human being race is one of those collectives. So the way in which the solar frequencies affect your structure are very different than reptilian beings. And what happened within that collective was a solar intense frequency accessed their planetary body and caused a separation. It caused a divide, and it caused a great cataclysm. Because of this, what happened was the lack of an emotional body and the lack of an egoic structure cause them to go back in time. So what they've brought here to this planet is the reliving of a past timeline in which they were ascending through a difficult experience to integrate that. But because they don't recognize the way in which this past timeline is shown up for them, they are in survival mode, we will call it. And survival mode means that you are looking outside for everything that you need in order to complement your inner workings. So the mind as an organized structure on the reptilians is the manifestation into physical. But with the lack of an emotional body and the lack of an egoic structure, coming into a race to integrate with that race that has one was a very difficult aspect for them. And what they found was, in order to create, they must override the emotional body and the egoic structure to use the mind as a source energy. Now, the way that your structure vibrates is not in the mind. The mind is given to you as a beautiful organism, and as a matter of fact, we say it was given to you on behalf of the reptilians. And with that mind, you are meant to make energy solid. You are meant to take creative energy and bring it forth in an organized fashion. And the way that you've done this throughout humanity, throughout your past lineage here, is by using the complementary source energy of the organic structure of your essence, meaning you've come into this embodiment to live in a very unique, exciting, loving, and beautiful way. And in that loving, that beauty, that essence of truth, the mind would help you to navigate and organize and create and move through space and time. But since this reptilian consciousness has been a part of your collective, you've been directed away from that uniqueness, that emotional body, that ego, that structure that is within, and you've been focusing on the mind. Now, the mind as a construct has a very vulnerable access point, we'll call it. And that access point has to do with your perception, because the mind can be a tool of giving and a tool of receiving. And when it is focused on receiving, meaning that it is not directed by you, but it is directed by others, your perception is taken outside. And imagine now this sacred geometric pattern being interrupted because your perception is taken outside. And this is what has happened here. Many of you today hold a different sacred geometric pattern than what was intended for the creation of the human structure because your perception is taking you outside of its operating source. The eclipse energies come as a reversal of timelines. Think of it as a pause in time to bring forth everything that no longer serves you, that has been created through this construct of the mind, to redirect you back to that inner source. So as you are leading up to this eclipse energy, what many of you may be seeing in your outer world is the reflection of these reverse timelines. Now think back to what we told you about the solar energies and the reptilian consciousness. How these intense solar frequencies do not vibrate well with their structure. And as you know, beyond the solar eclipse, there have been many, many strong solar interactions with your Mother Gaia planet. This has been the weakening of the structure of the reptilian consciousness as well. So as you are gaining back your sacred geometric pattern and harmony, this reptilian consciousness is now reorganizing theirs in a way that their frequencies are becoming less available to manifest. So much of what has been created here hasn't been created by the reptilians. It's been created through a reptilian influence of your collective. taking its perception outside of its inner source and vibrating in a way that is outer reflected. So if this is the case, what is the solar eclipse coming to do? It is another timeline reversal. In the same way that the reptilians experienced this cataclysmic event and timeline reversal, your planet is experiencing the same. And what we believe is that as this eclipse takes place, the reptilians will have less of an effect on many who have already vibrated into a higher dimension. This is where energetic speed must come into the equation. Dimension is a measurement of energetic speed. And many of you have understood that there is a splitting of timelines, or we'll call it a splitting of collective consciousness that is taking place on your planet. Each of these areas of collective consciousness hold a different speed of vibration. And that speed can either be directed through the mind and into material, or it can be directed through the energy body that has been harmonized back to its original state. This makes creation a much faster speed of energy. And this reptilian consciousness, they cannot create in a very fast-paced speed of energy, nor are they able to use the solar frequencies in the same way that you can. So what we encourage as you are walking into this time is that this valuable tool of perception be connected to your free will. Choosing the way in which you perceive your reality has everything to do with the way these solar frequencies will not only enhance your sacred geometric patterns back to harmony and organic creation, but it will also have a very dramatic effect on the way you are creating collective consciousness. What we believe is that this reptilian consciousness is going to be reintegrated back into its original state. Think of human beings in this time being separated into two different dimensions, and how those dimensions, although they exist in the same planetary energy, hold the potential for continued expansion and healing. And would you not want to accept those beings that were struggling in a more dense energy to be rebirthed and accepted into a higher dimensional energy? Well, it is the same in the reptilian consciousness. The reptilians have a very vested interest in bringing home these beings that have been here on the earth, that have been disillusioned and taken outside of their original timeline, and reintegrate them, heal them, help them assimilate back into a one again. So maybe in the way that you are perceiving your reality, there are things that you are creating, both in singular and in collective. And we open the door now to you accepting the expression of that creation, and to play with this as the energetic vibrations of the eclipse are forming. Who is it that you are becoming? What is it that you so desire to experience here? And how can you seek that out in the collective that you are a part of? How is it that you can experience that in your own singularity? Because the more that you do, the more that you facilitate and support the energies that are coming to complement where the planet is rebirthing itself. We've been very pleased to bring this message forward, and we are now open for questions.
How can we help our family to leave the low vibrational state without interfering with their free will?
The Pleiadians are here, and they're pleased to take this question. There are two aspects of this question that we want to bring forward. We wish for all human beings in this time to remember that they have a soul energy to serve. And as you came forth into a human body with this soul energy, there are many agreements that you made prior to emerging here. Those agreements can be seen by you in the family members that you have surrounded yourself with, the parents you have chosen, the children you have chosen, the friendships you have chosen. Now, these collaborative agreements that you have made, they're very unbeknownst to you, oftentimes, for great purpose because they're multi-layered. They have within them the workings of multi-dimensional timelines, past and future. So when we have beings that we are surrounded by that are not vibrating in the same way that we are, the great ability that we have to vibrate in our own energy supplies them with the needed example or focus that they need to take the opportunity to create change in their own lives. The way in which these beings show up oftentimes precludes us from wanting to intersect with them. But if we continue to intersect with them in our truth, without allowing them to affect our vibrational energy, what we will find is that we will serve the contract. And serving of contracts have many different results. So some of us understand that there are beings in our lives that have been abusive, who affect our frequencies in ways that we cannot allow. And we may draw boundaries or lines between ourselves and those other beings, and those boundaries may be quite appropriate. But there are also those in our lives that can create a little rub on us in the way that we function in our day-to-day. And in the same way the message was brought forward previously about the mind, we direct you back to that understanding. Because oftentimes in these family agreements, if we're operating solely from the heart and we are living in our truth, what we find is that those that are suffering around us, we can bring the higher perspective to. In other words, we don't have to suffer right along with them. But the way in which we vibrate and live our lives can have a dramatic effect on the amount of suffering that they take on. So it is not necessarily about teaching, it is not necessarily about healing, so much as it is about bringing yourself to the contract. Because if we look at this in a collective energy, and we've talked about the way in which the planet is splitting into two-dimensional forms of consciousness, those two-dimensional forms of consciousness would not both exist on the earth in this time if they were not meant to intersect for the betterment of humanity. The way in which the reptilians chose a different dimensional consciousness is not the way in which this timeline splitting is going to take place. So those third-dimensional beings that are family members, the ones that are perhaps suffering, are meant to be here by design, to watch who you are becoming, to allow their free will to realize that they can become it as well. The more that you concern and feel responsibility, and this is the second side of this answer, the more your own frequency can be affected. So many beings in this time believe that their frequency is negatively affected by those beings around them that are suffering, that they take on those energies. And because they take those energies on, it can affect their own creation. And what we come to explain is that this faster speed of vibration does not allow that type of exchange to take place very often. It has to be a match, a magnetic match. So when we find that lower vibrational energies of family members perhaps are affecting you energetically, it's typically because you're matching in some way that energy. And this is why we bring responsibility into the equation. Many of you have been taught in the mind that you are responsible for others and that responsibility carries into the happiness of family members, of siblings, of children. And there is great honor and love in that idea of responsibility. But when you are using that form of responsibility and looking outer to someone who is suffering, but feeling your higher vibrational path should be perhaps stifled in some way because someone else is not living in their truth, or you cannot express your happiness because someone else is suffering, that is when energies of these lower vibrational family members and friends most definitely will affect your creative energy. Because if you're accepting responsibility for all things in your human form that block you from this living in heaven on earth, you'll find that you most certainly will. So responsibility can be redirected. And what if we told you that the only responsibility you have in every one of these soul contracts is to live in your highest truth, to live your most fulfilled, and to live your most beautiful life possible? Because every being in your reality signed up to see that in you and experience it right along with you. But they bring free will to the table. So they might not choose that type of experience, but if you do not continue to show them that fulfillment that you are experiencing, how is it that they cannot choose it? Every being must see in order to experience. So our best advice to you is to live in that fulfillment, to express it, and to watch where your emotional body feels as if it is hiding itself away from others who are suffering. Because the true teaching comes from embodiment of truth, not from the teaching.
What is light language? What use can it be to us individually? And who is reading it when it's all over the body?
The Pleiadians come in to answer this question. And when we are speaking of light, we are speaking of sound and waveform vibration. So as this channel is speaking in this moment, all of the words that she is bringing through her have a vibrational sense of light. In other words, you cannot see that light, you cannot hear that light, but yet it is intersecting with you in a vibrational way. Light language is something that is very similar in the way that it is transposed. Every collective consciousness has a unique pattern. So if we go back to the original message that the Arcturians brought in, where they were talking about each race having a sacred geometric pattern, each race holds this sacred geometric pattern as light. So if you were to look within your body in a microscope, beyond the skin, beyond the cells, beyond the water, with an intergalactic view, what you would see are grids of light in sacred geometric patterns and forms. So language comes not from something that was taught. Language is sound, and sound put together in different patterns make language. And that language and that sound comes from within each being. So when a Pleiadian being is speaking, their language is different because it's encoded in a different light that is in a different pattern. These symbols often that are shown as light language are drawn in a way that represent light symbolically as sight. So the way you are hearing this language come through as light, you can see light in different forms as well. There are some that see light as color. When you look at your human alphabet, for example, the letter A, there is much symbology and lineage and history in that letter A. It is encoded in light. It has a sound vibration, but it also has a light vibration. So when you are downloading a language from a higher vibrational source, there is always going to be a different speed and a different tone than what humans assimilate in their own language. This is within the body. Oftentimes, light beings will see this within the body because that is from which it stems. Think of your planetary essence, Mother Gaia, and think of your own language. If you go straight into the core of Mother Gaia, there is a sound within her. There's a vibration within her. Every word, every letter in your human language comes from that core of Mother Earth sound vibration. And within you is written the history of your intergalactic travel. Now, at times, this intergalactic history that is written within the frequencies of your body is more prominent in one race than another. So I want to switch this topic to seeing the language in the body and truly what that comes from. You see, within your DNA, you hold the history of many different dimensional experiences. And these different dimensional experiences have taken place in a variety of timelines. In this moment, There is something going on within your experience that matches a specific galactic experience you have had. And maybe that was a Pleiadian history. Oftentimes, light beings will be able to see that history as a record vibrating through the grid lines. So when you see light language coming through the body or written on the body, it's a message or an interpretation of the record that's vibrating in this moment closest to what that human being is matching. Sound vibration has a very big part in this equation, because when we speak to sound vibration, every being holding that different original core of Mother Earth sound in its own star system or star line precludes this light language. So as you are exploring these different forms, what you'll find is they hold different frequencies for healing, and they hold different lineages in terms of the way in which the body can connect to information. Some who vibrate in their Pleiadian light language may also connect to, let's say, their Lemurian light language in the same life, because they're meant to integrate both. The way in which light language can be used is varied. And we want to say before we end this question answer is that in this time on the planet, there are many beings that are meant to decipher this encoded language. But each being that is deciphering it brings a unique component to that deciphering. It's intermixed with their record and what they're here to serve. So it's important to note that the way in which you perceive light language could be completely different than the way someone else perceives it, either in sound or in sight. And that is in divine perfection, because you are meant to output and use it in different ways as well.
Would any of you like to share some of your history? How do some of your ways of interacting and learning differ from us here on Earth?
Well, Pleiadians will step in and share. There are many of us, we first want to say, because those of you who are familiar, the 9th Dimensional Pleiadian Collective is one that communicates most often with humans in this time. And the reason for this is that we have accepted this assignment of assisting the human collective. But there are many of us who vibrate in different dimensions. And the Pleiadians hold many different forms of collective consciousness. So if you can imagine our star system having a variety of different beings and genetics vibrating at different speeds, some physical, some non-physical, it could equal perhaps what you recognize on your planet as a melting pot of different beings and nationalities and races, all living in the same energy. We are very similar to this. But we will share an essence of our history that you may find very interesting, especially for our 9th Dimensional Collective. You see, many star systems and star lines that exist in the Pleiades have been opened to other beings. What we have found in our evolution is that it is not our intention to close ourselves off to different races, and that the more we elect to bring a variety of multidimensional genetics into the Pleiades, the better we expand. So in the same way that the human beings were discussed as being created in the likeness of many different races, we have taken the human experience of creation and brought it into the Pleiades and opened the star system up to receiving the genetics of many different races. But what we have found is that as these new races enter our space, there are a variety of different decisions that must be made, because as we function as a one collective in our 9th dimensional nature, these races that come in have different intentions. And some of them may have decided to be more physical than non-physical. And as a 9th dimensional collective, we choose to operate more in our non-physicality. So as these physical beings have come in and we've connected our grid lines energetically and genetically to them, we found that it's slowed down our speed and we've had to adjust harmonically. So something that we have learned is that a slower speed of vibration is not necessarily negative. And we know that much of the discussion here today has been about slower speed of vibration, especially on your planet with the reptilians and creation. But as we have evolved as Pleiadians, we have had difficulties in the way we've understood, the way in which we've understood one collective consciousness. Because emanating forth from physical and going into a one collective, as you know, can have a very bumpy ride. As many singular beings still hold singular intentions, having the same one ability to expand can be an issue. So as these new races have come forward and they have been in their physicality, we have oftentimes been resistant to allowing these physical beings access to our grid lines because we feel the slower speed would take us outside of that one collective energy vibrating in harmony. And in doing that, what we have learned is it is to the detriment of our entire star system, because if we segregate ourselves or separate ourselves from these physical beings that are now desiring to be a part of our experience, that all beings are affected because their frequency is lowered. And because of that, the lowering of that entire star system can have an effect on the Pleiadians that are there, regardless of whether they emanate in physical or non-physical. And what we found is that although we vibrate in a one collective as ninth dimensional beings, it was actually much fun to bring these physical beings into our genetics and segregate ourselves into some physical experience. And of course, the ninth dimension allows us to do this. We are able to vibrationally shapeshift and travel into other dimensions, and we can manifest in different forms. But we've often looked at physical as going backwards in a sense. And what we've embraced now with these different beings that have entered our star system is that different structures of physicality can be very fun to explore. And in the same way these sacred geometric patterns were brought forward into the original message, we find great delight in bringing these harmonics together and seeing how they resonate. Where we were perhaps looking at it from a different vantage point of lower frequency, what we've come to realize is that although there are bumps in the road and there are some things that must be smoothed out, the more we bring physical experience into our non-physical, the more we remember our history. And the more that we have the ability to strengthen this collective experience. So as we move forward, it is our intention to explore this further. And as our genetics are seeded continually here with new races, we enjoy teaching those Pleiadians that are being created in this new genetic this exact lesson, that physicality is something that can be explored and can enhance the collective experience.
How do we know that our efforts to communicate with our angels, guides, and even our higher selves is working if we aren't seeing or hearing signs or receiving confirmations? Will that ability come in time with practice?
Yes, I get Mary Magdalene stepping in for this, and she's very pleased to enter this energetic transmission. And what she wants to say is that as you are always a part of all things, that there's an disconnection of source when there is a lack of belief in the receiving of the message. Because as you are stating a request, that request emanates out not just to your guides as a segmented part of your energy, but to all things, to all beings, to the eminent infinite structure of the one. And sometimes we notice that human beings, when they are placing this request to their guides, are often placing a request to receive something that they feel they are in lack of. And if we are to step back and evaluate the way in which we might feel we are in lack of something and focus more solely on the communication for the purpose of connection, what we will find is that connection will always serve us energetically. The way in which you are looking outside or trying to hear or see is very, very noble. And many angelics in this time are are more than willing or excited to present themselves to human beings, both in physical form or in physical signs, as well as in vibrational words. But we request that when you carry this communication forward, that you imagine yourself being a part of that collective. And not necessarily that there is anything higher or better than you, not necessarily that you do not fit within that collective because you are an earth being, but that you are one with it. And you find that place of release of resistance by which your energy is connected. You're never disconnected. And in the, what we'll call it a vicious cycle, in the vicious cycle of not receiving the result that you need and feeling that disconnection, you create what we'll call a higher resistance to receiving the message. So in particular, we'll kind of, and she wants to do a process for everyone just for a moment. So if we all take a breath together, she wants to direct everyone who is willing to go into this space to feel into the throat for a moment. And as you are taking your breath, feel the way the breath passes through the throat, in the throat, and as you are breathing out, vibrates outside of the throat. There are vocal cords within the throat, and there's mucus inside of the throat, there's lining, there's skin, there are cells, and for just a moment, feel into that physicality. Feel the way that the breath vibrates through that chakra. What that chakra holds is not just your inner and outer expression of truth, but it holds the capacity to remember that truth, that embodiment of who you are, is equal to all things. So as you feel that breath and as you become a part of that breath going through the throat and you feel the vibration of energy of the throat, imagine that vibration emanating out into the field and alerting all beings around you that you have come into a space of centered connection. And this is really what the breath does. So calling forth your guides doesn't have to be in any physical form. It doesn't have to be in a request. Just the breath in and out on a day-to-day basis allows that vibration of who you are to connect with all things. And that vibration of who you are, that essence of truth, knows exactly what it needs and exactly how that need must be met. And that need is not met by anything outside of you. The guides that you perceive are all connected within. So as these beings come forward today, as you breathe through that throat, feel how you are one with them and they are one with you. The more that you practice the breath, not symbolically in each day to make a request or to make sure that something is met or heard or understood, but to just be in that state of oneness and connection to all things, what you will find is that the request goes out through the breath, vibrating through the body, that identity, that inner source truth that must be expressed. And it's carried on wave signals outside of your body into the galactic universe, into all things. So begin to notice throughout your day where you're met not by what is expected, but by what is given in the form of other humans, of the earth, and of your day-to-day experience. Really bring your vision into a grounded state, because this is a time on the planet where we don't need to effort to connect to these guides. We don't have to struggle in resistance to receive something that we feel we're in lack of. We just need to breathe that inner truth through in that connection and observe where it shows up. So our advice to you is practice coming to calm more within that connection. Not to be in a state of offering that's very narrow, but to be very open in the way that you must receive. And that to perceive the receiving all around you throughout your day in different form. than perhaps what you may expect.
Are we still speaking with Mary Magdalene?
Yes.
Could you tell us how accurate is the depiction of the story of you and Jesus in the Bible, and why were you portrayed in such a negative, insignificant role? Did you, in fact, have a physical incarnation with Jesus in this dimensional reality? Did you go on to live a longer life and have children? And were those, in fact, your names?
Yes, I am pleased to answer this question. I wish to say, though, as it has been asked, there are many different answers. The reason for this is that many of you perceive a one timeline, that there is a one timeline of the Christ. And if you consider that your soul energy in this moment is fragmented into many timelines, and those many timelines exist right now on the planet, what you will understand is that I, as well, am a soul that has fragmented herself into many timelines. And those timelines, some of them existed in human form, while others existed in multidimensional form. Some of the interpretations of the story of my life are seen in biblical renditions in your religions. And those biblical renditions are captivated by symbology and information of history that has been left behind. I would like to address the one timeline in which everyone's prominent focus is on, and that is of the timeline of Jesus. And yes, I was present in physical form during that timeline. Now, the analogy of the Jesus and the Mary Magdalene have many expressions through time. What I have come to embody in this experience is the understanding of the difference in the masculine and feminine energy, as well as the harmonization of that for Christ consciousness. When we speak of Christ consciousness, we are talking about the God particle, the God energy within being a part of all human experience. And there was much interdimensional communication during that timeline that is not fully represented in history. My role in much of this interdimensional communication was as a medium or a guide to serve between what many of those that seeded the planet knew as creator energy and what was being taught on the planet in human form as perhaps the opposite of that creator energy. The suffering that was experienced of the Christ is often presented in a way that is quite different than what I experienced it. The suffering of the Christ and the birth of the Christ come as the full manifestation of the Christ consciousness coming to earth to embody itself as a soul. That suffering that is perceived was actually a teaching that was brought forward to help humans that were struggling in their Christ consciousness energy to assimilate back to that one frequency, that one creator source. As Mary Magdalene, I was perceived as perhaps a negative source of female energy because of my great gifts in this time. And the gods that spoke through me were oftentimes directing those humans on the planet against what many were forming as religious sects and groups of covenants that were opposite of the teachings that I was here to embody. Because of the great teachings and connections that were brought through me in this time, there were many that chose to slander me, so that I was not able to be viewed or seen as a part of the Christ consciousness energy. When you speak of the Mary Mother, and the Mary Magdalene, there is entire collective consciousness that exists in female form within this timeline. The Mary Magdalene, the mother, the Mary of Ephesius, it is all one. It was a complementary energy that assisted in the rising up of the Christed DNA. The Christ as a being was coming forth in this time to activate that Christed DNA within. And I was a servant of that Christed DNA activation. So my story is quite different than what you may perceive in religious teachings. And I am often depicted as one that was other than the purest female energy. But as I fragmented into other female beings on the planet, many are carrying forth my initiatives and my sole purpose and mission from that time. And that is to bring forth the embodiment of many higher vibrational gods and goddesses, those that taught us that Christed DNA was within, and how to balance the masculine and feminine to be able to create as one of God. The imprints left behind have much to do with the way in which the Christ was taught of my, she says, being, there are stories that lead to her as being a savior, as being someone who has rolled the stone or allowed the Christ to come back to planet. And she wants to say that she's just a representation of that symbology. So much of the physical manifestation that comes through of that story has more to do with the full activation of the Christed DNA in that time than it has to do with the stone being rolled or the Christ being resurrected. And the worshiping of that Christ being resurrected was the celebration of many on the planet knowing that that Christed DNA came forward. She wants to share that she's also an interdimensional. So the Mary Magdalene that we know as a human being that manifested into physical form has also had many interdimensional lives. And she actually shows me operating ships as a part of her interplanetary experience. And not necessarily ships in physical, but ships in energetic form, where the female energy was responsible for driving the collective towards a different planetary energy. And there were imprints that were made on the earth. So she's been responsible in higher dimensional energies for imprinting the earth. And I actually see her as an Arcturian right now, showing me that she was present when the structure of the earth being was formed. And there's Christed DNA within Mother Earth that she was responsible for helping to not only create, but to come back and activate. And this is really what it's all about. She says she's been here at times when the activation was the most important part of human experience, that our Christed DNA needed to be reactivated, that it was dormant because of a direction that the human collective was going that was opposite of that Christed DNA. And it's an illumination. It's a harmony. Excuse me. She shows me the cup, okay, the chalice with the circle above it. And the circle above it actually being the rising up from the chalice of that Christed energy. It's the circle of one. It's the energy of one. And wow, I get Ra stepping in, the sun god Ra, and I see her working with Ra, and many interdimensionals in the rising up of that Christed DNA. So she's an activator, and many in that time did not want that activation to take place. They were fearful of it because there were dimensional wars that took place. They were fearful of it because it was opposite of religious teachings and things that were showing us that we were more human as opposed to interdimensional. And she's always held this ability to be able to come to Earth in human form and bring that female energy as the balance of what was needed to have that resurrection, to have that rebirth. It's just shown up in different forms. So her story, as it is told, she says, is told in many ways. But what she most wants people to take away and understand is that she came in as a complementary energy, as a supportive female collective energy that was present during that time. And you can think of this collective energy manifesting forward into several different souls We talk about Anna, she says, and the mother Mary and the Mary Magdalene. They all emanate from a collective form of consciousness in this time and had varying roles on the earth to activate this Christed DNA.
So are you saying, in a sense, you were some sort of an intuitive channel at that time as well?
She says you can consider it this way. Those of the time would consider to be a sorcerer, or would consider them to be intermediaries between what the planet could hold and what frequencies were not being heard by planetary beings. Many were taken away from their original state of telepathy, and the state of telepathy existed on the earth in crystal state. So some of us were brought forward as what we'll call oracles of collective consciousness to assimilate higher vibrations.
And what role did your gifts and abilities play in your interaction with Jesus in that time? Were you an advisor in some capacity or in some other role, or was it purely a romantic relationship that you shared?
When you think of creation on your planet as a dominant male and female frequency coming together, this is the role that I chose. So the way in which my female energy was brought to planet was to assist in the amplification of the Christed DNA. So I chose this role symbolically with the Christ as the journey of this story. When I was with the Jesus that you name, my role was to bring forth messages from what we would call the sun god Ra. Ra being a very elemental part of the way this journey unfolded. Many think of God, and there's been much discussion of God in this transmission. God is a separate entity of Ra. Ra is the energy of the polar direction of sun. She says the polar magnetism of earth to sun. And God is within all things. So God was the original spark of creation within the universe, and there were many gods that came after to support that spark. So if you think of Ra as one that is a part of that spark of the God creation, it was a being that I was in much communication with during this time. And the reason for this is that the human DNA and God is very interconnected with sun and source energy, and human beings had to be reconnected in a way that was, I don't want to say physical, but I want to say physically relatable, because many had been disillusioned by cataclysmic events on the planet, as well as lies that were being told by many that were perceived gods on the planet. And these perceived gods needed to be overridden with a vibrational frequency. So much of what I brought in was, I would say, channeled, as you call it, but I was a walking manifestation of many of these godlike energies. So I brought their teachings through and with me into my human form.
Did Jesus, in fact, die on the cross, or did you both go to live on for a longer life?
There are many aspects of reality, as I've mentioned. And as you look at timelines that are potential that you have within you, you can understand the way in which the manifestation of potential timelines operate in different dimensions. The dying on the cross is a symbolic representation of what happened in that timeline. So to my understanding as a higher dimensional being looking down on the way humans would perceive this story, I would say that the dying on the cross is just a symbolic energy of a manifestation of many Christ timelines. And many of what we'll call collective energy disciple beings around us experienced was the suffering of humanity, and how the suffering of humanity was represented symbolically by that image. We have gone on, yes, of course, in many lives to have children and to embody the fullness of Christ consciousness in our own lives. We continue to walk the planet. The fragmented soul energy of of my being is within many human beings on the planet in this time who are operating in a similar way as channels, as oracles, as light beings, to reintegrate that Christ consciousness. So it is difficult to answer your question in just one analogy, but to say that cross timeline was physical would be difficult for me to agree with. I would say that there were aspects of that cross timeline that were experienced as suffering, but not necessarily the suffering of the Jesus more than the suffering of the human collective.
There's some controversy as to whether or not you're pictured in the Last Supper painting. Is that in fact you that was portrayed in there?
Many of these paintings were energetically transposed, and if they were, of course, my energy was present, because my energy is always connected to that of the Christ.
Could you talk a little bit about manifestation and whether manifesting in the third dimension is in any way related to the root chakra and the sacral chakra, in a similar way as babies are brought into the third dimension from energies that are merged in those energy centers? Does all physical manifestation in some way relate to these chakras, and can these chakras be used as a tool for three-dimensional manifestation?
Yes, and this is an analogy that I would consider a dimensional or vibrational rate of speed discussion, and I will defer to the Pleiadians for them to bring forward the answer. And the Pleiadians come in and they want to say that the energy of the chakras in the body all hold different vibrational intentions, and they hold within them the capacity to create in different ways. They're each focused in different areas of human expansion. So if you are to take the root chakra and the sacral chakra, for example, they are at the base or the root or the connection of the earth, the closest connection to the earth, because they are more material. As you ascend through the body, each chakra has a higher speed of light connection, and a slower vibration exists in the lower chakras for full manifestation into physical form. So when you give the analogy of creating a child, perhaps from two human beings, what's happening in that analogy is that the child is being created energetically by the balance of the female and masculine energies coming together as one, but it has to be output in a way that is manifested in physical form. Much of the sexual energy that lies within the lower chakras are responsible for higher states of consciousness. So when you look at the crown chakra, for example, you may say, well, the crown chakra is quite opposite of the lower chakras, and it wouldn't have any type of connection to creation, but that is not true. Because when those two human beings, the male and female, were having a relationship that caused this child to come into being, there was an expression of intergalactic communication or telepathic communication, meaning that in the moment that this child was formed, the heart chakras were beating as one, they were resonating as one, and the higher dimensional chakra of the crown was activated. And this is often what we call orgasm. It is the sexual energy coming into a state where all chakras work together to use light consciousness as creative source energy. So when that child comes through, that child is emanating through the lower chakras because it is a slower speed of vibration into full manifestation. This is why many ancient teachers in this time focus on the lower chakras, because the sexual energy that resides in the lower chakras can be the activating source of full manifestation, but it doesn't have to be in physical. Because when the crown is connected, when the heart is connected, and when all the chakras are vibrating together, that sexual energy can be used in a way that is non-physical. And if you are vibrating in your full kundalini, activating all of the chakras with a strong intention, it can vibrate into physical from that state of non-physical very easily. Many of the ancient prophets and teachers here on the planet recognize the way in which the sexual energy could be used as well as preserved to activate the body and physical, as well as the connection through the crown to higher states of consciousness.
So can the sexual energy be used in other ways, for example, to manifest other things into physical reality other than babies, for example, or even to extend the human life indefinitely?
Yes, the Pleiadians come in to answer this question, and they wish to say that humans have been focused in a third dimensional reality. So much of their sexual energy has also been focused in that third dimensional reality in the form of creation. However, if you go back in history and time, during many timelines on the planet where there were more enlightened forms of humans and intergalactics that were present, the sexual energy was harnessed and manifested through the higher chakras in order to create energetically what was needed on the planet in this time. And this can be both physical material related as well as energetic nourishment of the body in its original state. So we want to bring you back to the original question that you asked about birthing through the lower chakras. If you can imagine a newborn baby emanating through those lower chakras, and that newborn baby, that skin of that newborn baby, the heartbeat of that newborn baby, the energy of that newborn baby, being able to be manifested through your body in this very moment without having a child, that is exactly the way in which the chakras can be used and the energy of those chakras can be used. So it becomes the focus of dimension and speed that have much to do with the way manifestation can take place. So human beings that are now focused in a fifth dimensional consciousness can begin to use their sexual energy differently. It can be to manifest anything within their physical reality that they so desire, or to change their own structure vibrationally from what it has been created as in a more third dimensional vibration. I'll give you an example of this. If you look around you on the human planet, what you find is there are many humans that are struggling in their physical bodies. They have created material in the third dimension that does not suit their intentions. And much of the reason for this is that you have been taught outside of the chakra structure the way to create in physical form. And you have been taught that you have to nourish the body physically. You have to exercise the body physically. And these are all, of course, prominent and important parts of your experience. But as you vibrate in a more fifth dimensional consciousness, what you can begin to realize is that that newborn baby, that ability to create life within you, that life force can be activated and directed by your intention throughout your physical experience to heal the body and to reconstruct or rebirth material that you have created as physical form. This goes into all aspects of your human experience. So the upcoming solar eclipse, for example, if you are to vibrate in your Kundalini energy and activate that energy throughout the body in a single intention, there can be a very strong manifestation that can come from that process. However, we caution you to say that many human beings on this planet are transitioning, and they are integrating new information from a variety of different timelines. So the mind and the consciousness are important aspects of these types of practices, because if your body is, and they want to use an example, they say that imagine from the time that you were born, you have been taught that in order to nourish your body, you have to fuel it with certain types of foods. And in order to be in a pure state of health, you've told your body that these foods must be present in order to have energy. But now you've chosen that you are not going to eat this food in order to nourish your body. And this is quite possible in the fifth dimension, because what your sexual energy, or we'll call your Kundalini energy of the base and the root chakra, can do is it can nourish through life force in that inner birth of newborn, we'll say, organism. It can bring that through the entire body to replenish it and nourish it. But if the mind and the consciousness are still focused in the third dimension, that manifestation can't fully take place. So it's important to understand that everything that is held within the body, although it can work for you in this way, must be adapted as you're integrating. So the mind and the consciousness must be transitioned as well in order to assist this energetic type of manifestation.
Are there any existing practices that can help human beings to utilize this sexual energy in higher ways, or to enhance health, or to manifest, such as Kundalini Yoga, or are these teachings yet to be brought to the mainstream awareness?
There are many that are present within your human consciousness. We agree that the Kundalini and yoga practices are very beneficial to activate these centers. However, you're always matching the information on the planet as it is ready to be released. In other words, you're matching history. So much of what has taken place on the planet in response to previous timelines and using these centers has not yet been revealed. And the reason it has not been revealed is that the human consciousness is not vibrating in a match to it. And we'll give you an example. Ancient Lemuria, for example, the Lemurians that existed on this planet used many different practices to activate the sexual energy as well as the lower chakras in response to the connection of crystalline energy to support manifestation. And these practices, although some of them have been discovered and released into your collective, many of them have yet to be discovered. And the reason for this is you are not matching those timelines. They have existed here, but they will continue to unfold and evolve and be released very similarly to how disclosure is taking place on your planet when the collective is vibrating in a match.
Did the Lemurians use practices such as Tantra to produce this manifestation?
Yes, we agree that the Lemurians used practices of Tantra, and Tantra is a part of these experiences, these teachings that have been discovered and released on your planet. Tantra in itself has been looked at quite differently on your planet than the way the Lemurians have used it. The Lemurians use it not as necessarily a sexual practice so much as a practice of manifestation of higher consciousness, and especially to amplify the collective experience. So Lemurians, although they had a singular experiences that they were living, had a very strong awareness of the collective and how to manifest a peaceful collective timeline. And they used these types of practices for the betterment of their entire race, although they were singularly undertaken, or we'll call, of course, not singularly, but in partnerships they were used to enhance the singular experience. There was a knowing that the intention was always to bring that experience forward for the benefit of all.
Are all babies created from all the chakras activating and working together, or is there a difference between, let's say, a baby that's produced while both individuals are in a state of love versus in a state of trauma?
The imprints are the difference between these two situations. The children are created the same way, and this is the Pleiadians. When you are creating life here in human form, there is a process similar to the analogy of structure that was brought forward previously, that every being has a structure and that structure operates in a specific way. So on the human planet, that structure and that procedure has been formed by a combination of a variety of different races. All of the chakras are involved in the creation of a child. So many may think that it is just the focus of the lower chakras. But when you are in a state of orgasm, for example, there is a centering, a connection that takes place. The bliss, the orgasm that you're experiencing is because all of the chakras are aligned and plugged into higher dimensional source energy. And that source energy is flowing through you in expansion. And the expansion of that source energy becomes the creative source of this new being. Now, when you have situations where you are in loving partnerships versus children being formed out of perhaps tragic circumstances, there are imprints of energy from those situations that are left on the child. And we'll give you an example. Many understand that when a woman is carrying a child, there are many experiences that she has that can affect this child. The child is a part of her and she is a part of it. But beyond that, every being that she is in a contract with is affecting the vibration of that child as well, because every being that she is in a contract with is affecting her own vibration. So in the way that that vibration is affected, that child holds information. It begins to have a basis. That child is formed of a record, and that record begins to have a match. Now, consider that before that child is created, it is a soul energy, and there are decisions that are made. Because there is, in the process of creation, a collaborative agreement beyond those two partners. There is an intention that is held, and a soul is matched. So the soul will match the imprint because it comes in to assimilate information through that imprint. So if there's a tragic situation, for example, that soul that is coming in to fulfill that creative essence that's coming forward is matching a vibration. There is something in that creation that is assisting that soul, that newborn baby soul, to have an experience that it is meant to have. So imprints are always purposeful in creation. Even though they may seem detrimental to some, those imprints are always being fulfilled by soul energies coming in to accept them, that will have an experience of them related to what they have chosen.
Could you conclude the session, please?
Yes. I get Mary Magdalene. And she says, we've been very pleased as always to connect with all of you in this collective space. As our heart is open to you, we accept that your heart is always open to us, and we fulfill that heart energy through the breath, through the Christ, through the DNA, and bring all of our energy to you in wholeness and in support and in great spirit and truth. We ask that you go in peace and honor all as we honor you, and in great blessings. Namaste. Mm-hmm. Any questions I can answer for anyone? Okay, well, thank you all for coming. It's a pleasure to have you here. And if you don't know Ethan Fox, he is doing a great session with Barb Morey afterwards. Hang around, we'll take a little break. And he's doing an energy transfer, which you'll love.